So if the room suddenly starts spinning when you stand up, your first thought is probably that something is terribly wrong with your brain or maybe your heart.
Right, totally.
You grab the nearest counter to keep from falling over, and you start asking yourself, why am I suddenly experiencing these dizzy spells? Or just, a really poor sense of balance. But if you are a woman in your 40s or 50s, the culprit making you feel like you are on a rocky boat might actually be hiding in your reproductive system.
Yeah, it is an incredibly disorienting experience, and it honestly sends so many people into this complete spiral of medical anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
But we reviewed a 2018 Japanese study, and it found that nearly 36% of women aged 40 to 65 experience dizziness at least once a week. So if you are listening to this, you are absolutely not alone in this.
Wow, 36%. I mean, that is a massive portion of the population. So that is our mission for today's deep dive. We have pulled together this huge stack of sources, from the Vestibular Disorders Association to physical therapy clinics, medical journals, and even expert podcasts.
We really dug into everything.
We did. And we want to uncover the mechanics of how hormonal shifts during perimenopause and menopause completely rewire your sense of balance. But looking at the data from the vestibular clinics, it turns out that dizzy is actually just an umbrella term, right?
Yeah, it really is.
So before anyone can fix the problem, they have to define exactly which of the three distinct categories of dizziness they are experiencing.
Exactly. When you tell a doctor you feel dizzy, they basically need to act like a detective. So the first category our sources highlight is lightheadedness, which is clinically known as pre-syncope.
Okay.
This is that woozy, floating feeling, kind of like you were about to faint. And it's usually triggered by a drop in blood pressure when you stand up too fast.
Oh, right. Like the classic head rush.
Exactly. Then the sources identified disequilibrium. This is a physical unsteadiness where, the room isn't spinning, but you feel like you might actually tip over.
It's just a total loss of physical balance.
Right. It stems from a mechanical fault in your body's natural balance systems. So it often involves your joints, your muscles, or just your posture. And then finally, there is vertigo.
The big one.
The big one. It's the intense, completely false illusion that the environment is physically rotating around you.
Okay, let's unpack this with like a GPS analogy. If your internal navigation is failing, you have to know if the car's steering column is physically broken, which would be disequilibrium.
Right, the mechanics.
Or maybe the battery is dying and the screen is just flickering, which is lightheadedness. Or the satellite signal is entirely scrambled, sending you completely chaotic directions, which is vertigo.
That is a great way to look at it. To fix the GPS, you have to diagnose the specific point of failure in the system.
But wait, I'm kind of struggling with the timeline here. If estrogen drops gradually over the course of years during perimenopause, why would dizziness manifest as these sudden violent vertigo attacks? Like, why wouldn't it just be a slow, gradual decline in your overall balance?
Well, because estrogen isn't just a reproductive hormone. I mean, it is a structural hormone that maintains tissues all over the body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that includes a tiny crucial mechanism deep inside your ear called the vestibular system. Your inner ear is basically packed with estrogen receptors. They regulate blood flow and manage the delicate balance of the endolymph.
The endolymph, that is the specialized fluid in the ear canals.
Yeah.
Right, the fluid that kind of swishes around to tell your brain how your head is moving in space.
Precisely. And that fluid relies on a very specific ratio of potassium and sodium. Estrogen actually helps regulate the ion channels that maintain that chemical balance.
So when estrogen drops...
When estrogen levels begin to drop, the fluid dynamic literally changes. It can become thick or really sluggish, which completely alters how movement signals are transmitted to the brain.
Wow, so the signal gets literally bogged down.
It does, and it isn't just the fluid getting sluggish. The medical journals in our sources point to a condition called benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or BPPV.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it involves actual calcium carbonate crystals called otoconia that live inside the ear. They sit on this little membrane and act like microscopic weights. So when you tilt your head, gravity pulls on them, establishing your position in space.
Wait, actual crystals? I am picturing the inner ear as, like, a microscopic snow globe.
That is a perfect image. The crystals are the snow.
And estrogen controls the snow.
Yes. Estrogen plays a direct role in the metabolism of those calcium crystals. Your body's constantly breaking down and recycling them. So when estrogen drops, that normal recycling process is delayed, the crystals actually become larger.
Oh, yikes.
And furthermore, because dropping estrogen leads to decreased bone mineral density across the whole body, those tiny crystals can also become really fragile and just break apart.
So the snow gets heavy or it shatters.
Wow.
And then those rogue crystal fragments float away from their membrane and get trapped in the semicircular canals.
Exactly. That is the mechanical failure. When you roll over in bed or bend down to tie your shoe, those heavy rogue crystals slosh through the canal fluid.
And send the wrong signals.
It's very wrong. They send incredibly chaotic, magnified signals to your brain. Your visual system then tries to compensate, which causes your eyes to dart around uncontrollably. And that creates that terrifying sensation that the room is actually spinning.
Man, it really changes the entire perspective on menopause to realize that estrogen is quite literally the glue holding the structural integrity of your inner ear's GPS system together.
It really does. And the reason these dizzy spells manifest as sudden, violent attacks rather than just a slow decline, well, that comes down to the rate of change. Perimenopause is not a gentle downward slope. It is a total biological roller coaster.
Right, because during perimenopause, the estrogen doesn't just quietly fade away. It wildly spikes and crashes.
Yep.
Your brain senses the overall estrogen dropping, so it releases these stimulating hormones to try and force the ovaries to produce more. And then the ovaries squeeze out whatever they have left, causing this massive surge, which is inevitably followed by a sudden steep crash.
And this creates a completely chaotic feedback loop. The sources heavily emphasize that the rapid rate of change, those violent drops, is what triggers severe hypersensitivity in the vestibular system.
So it's the speed of the drop.
Exactly. This also explains why many women experience dizzy spells earlier in life during ovulation or right before their period or postpartum, because those are all moments when hormones are plummeting really rapidly.
Dr. Heather Bartos, from one of the expert podcast sources we reviewed, uses a brilliant analogy for this. She compares your sex hormones to the Brady Bunch.
Oh, I love this analogy.
It's so good, right? So testosterone is Greg, estrogen is Marcia, and progesterone is Jan. They have to function together as a harmonious family unit. But when Marcia suddenly starts acting out, spiking and crashing, the whole family descends into chaos.
Exactly. Your body craves homeostasis or stability. So when the hormonal family is fighting, the nervous system becomes highly reactive. It lowers the threshold for what your brain considers overwhelming sensory input.
Okay, so looking at the data from the vestibular clinics, a massive portion of this hypersensitivity results in a condition called vestibular migraines.
Yes, very common.
They are the most common neurological cause of vertigo in adults. They affect roughly 29% of perimenopausal women. But the defining feature here completely threw me off when I read the research. You don't actually need to have a headache to have a vestibular migraine. Wait, how does a migraine exist without pain?
I know, it sounds contradictory. A traditional migraine involves throbbing pain because of inflamed blood vessels around the brain. But a vestibular migraine primarily affects the brain's sensory processing centers.
So it's not about pain.
Right. Dropping hormones sensitize the brain's neural pathways. So instead of manifesting as a headache, the migraine manifests as intense vertigo, extreme motion sickness, and severe brain fog.
Wow. Nina Kozlov, a patient featured in one of the sources, describes this motion sensitivity perfectly. She said it wasn't always the room spinning for her. Often, it was her brain getting completely overwhelmed by visual input.
Oh, the visual dizziness.
Yeah. She describes walking into a big box store where the flickering fluorescent lights and the seemingly endless repetitive aisles triggered profound visual dizziness. Even just scrolling quickly on a computer screen was enough to trigger an attack.
The brain simply cannot process the sensory information because the hormonal chaos has lowered its tolerance so much. Doctors diagnosing this look for a personal or family history of typical migraines, or even a history of severe motion sickness in childhood.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if a patient has those risk factors and starts experiencing unexplained dizziness in their 40s, a vestibular migraine is a prime suspect.
But it's not just the brain's sensory pathways getting overwhelmed, though. The dropping estrogen sets off a physical chain reaction across the entire body. The sources show how other common, seemingly unrelated menopause symptoms cascade right into balance issues.
They are all connected.
Right. Let's take hot flushes, for example.
Okay, so hot flushes are essentially a rapid vascular response. Your brain mistakenly thinks your body is overheating, so your blood vessels rapidly dilate or widen to release heat through the skin.
And that sudden shifting of blood flow pulls blood away from the brain.
Exactly. It increases your heart rate. The resulting sweat dehydrates you, which then reduces your overall blood volume. And that specific combination of low blood volume and diverted blood flow is basically a fast track to lightheadedness.
And if your blood volume is fluctuating, your blood vessels are also dealing with structural changes, right? Because estrogen normally keeps blood vessels flexible.
Yes.
So as it drops, the vessels literally become stiffer. The sources note that without estrogen, a regulatory network in your kidneys called the renin-angiotensin system becomes overactive.
Which is a huge factor.
Yeah, it leads to midlife hypertension.
Yeah.
And high blood pressure itself is a major cause of dizzy spells. Add in the heavy erratic bleeding common in early perimenopause, which can cause iron deficiency anemia, and your blood physically cannot carry enough oxygen to your brain.
The interconnectedness of these systems is just profound. I mean, even a purely musculoskeletal issue can trigger dizziness.
Oh, yes. The mechanical link highlighted by the physical therapy clinic source, that was fascinating. Women in their 40s and 50s are highly susceptible to frozen shoulder.
Which is incredibly painful.
Right. And it's exacerbated by low estrogen affecting the elasticity of joints and connective tissue. So when your shoulder is locked and painful, you subconsciously change your posture. You hunch forward, straining the muscles in your neck and upper back.
And all that tension in the cervical spine throws off your proprioception.
That's your awareness of your body in space, right?
Exactly. Proprioception is your body's subconscious awareness of where it is. The nerves in your neck are constantly communicating with your inner ear and your eyes. So when the neck muscles are strained and tight, they send faulty, restrictive spatial signals to your brain.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, those signals conflict with the movement your eyes are seeing and the fluid moving in your ear. So the brain receives 3 different messages about where the body is, panics, and creates the sensation of dizziness.
It's just sensory overload. Since the root of the issue is this cascading system failure, from chaotic hormones to rogue ear crystals to stiff neck muscles, how do we actually interrupt the cycle? Let's dive into the actionable relief strategies in the research. Let's start with hormone replacement therapy, or HRT.
HRT requires a really highly personalized approach. In theory, by smoothing out the wild spikes and crashes of estrogen, HRT can stabilize the Brady Bunch hormone.
Calming Marcy down.
Exactly. It can calm the hypersensitivity in the brain and help maintain the proper fluid dynamics in the inner ear endolymph.
However, our expert source, Dr. Majas Frakic, explicitly warns that HRT is not a universal fix for dizziness. She noted that if a woman does not experience systemic low estrogen symptoms like hot flushes alongside her dizziness, HRT might actually backfire.
That is a really crucial point.
Yeah, she shared a case where a patient started HRT and immediately developed severe hypersensitivity to light and motion. If your body isn't actually lacking baseline estrogen, adding a synthetic influx can trigger the exact vestibular migraines you're trying to prevent.
It all comes down to identifying the specific failure in the GPS. If the issue is strictly mechanical, like the BPPV ear crystals we discussed, the most effective treatment is vestibular rehabilitation therapy.
Okay, what does that entail?
A trained physical therapist performs what's called the Epley maneuver. First, they observe the patient's involuntary eye twitches, which is called nystagmus, to map out exactly which of the 3 semicircular ear canals the crystals are trapped in.
And then they just physically flush them out.
They do. The therapist tilts the patient's head at a specific 45-degree angle and lays them back quickly. The patient usually experiences a brief, intense wave of vertigo as the crystals move.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It is uncomfortable for a moment, but the therapist holds position for about 30 seconds until the skinning stops, then rolls the patient onto their side. This uses gravity to physically guide the heavy calcium debris out of the sensitive canal and back into the utricle, which is a pouch where the body can safely dissolve them.
Okay, so mechanical physical therapy solves the rogue crystals. But we still have to manage the brain's neurological hypersensitivity to prevent those vestibular migraines.
Yeah.
The medical literature points heavily to the migraine diet.
Right.
And we aren't just talking about cutting out heavy caffeine or alcohol. There are hidden triggers that specifically aggravate the vestibular nerve. Things like aged cheeses, anything fermented with yeast, chocolate, and surprisingly, avocados. Wait, avocados.
I know, it's tragic. The biology behind why avocados and aged cheeses trigger dizziness is tied to biogenic amines, specifically tyramine and histamine. In a normal, balanced brain, an enzyme called monoamine oxidase breaks these chemicals down safely.
But the dropping estrogen messes with the enzyme.
Exactly. Estrogen fluctuations disrupt the levels of that enzyme.
So the chemicals enter the bloodstream totally unchecked.
Correct. The tyramine travels to the brain, causing blood vessels to constrict and then rapidly dilate. In a perimenopausal brain that already has a lowered sensory threshold, this sudden vascular expansion overstimulates the sensitized vestibular nerve, and that triggers the visual aura and vertigo associated with a migraine.
Wow. Okay, so if managing diet controls the chemical inputs causing the dizziness, sleep is how the nervous system physically clears out the chemical buildup. The sources emphasize a very specific math for recovery, the 90-minute sleep cycle rule.
Sleep is huge here. Throughout the night, the human brain cycles through stages of light, deep, and REM sleep, with each full cycle lasting roughly 90 minutes. At the completion of each cycle, the body releases crucial regulating hormones that repair the central nervous system.
Right, so the goal isn't necessarily just to get more sleep overall, but to wake up at the end of a cycle, not in the middle of deep sleep. You want to aim for exactly 6 hours, or ideally 7.5 hours of sleep, because those are multiples of 90.
Exactly.
Waking up at, say, the 7-hour mark interrupts a cycle, depriving the brain of that final dose of regulating hormones. For a nervous system already dealing with chaotic estrogen, missing that nighttime repair leaves the vestibular system highly reactive the following day.
And that daytime reactivity easily feeds into an anxiety loop. Feeling dizzy naturally causes panic, but worrying about getting a dizzy spell, stressing over whether the room will spin while you are driving, actually engages the sympathetic nervous system.
You're just flooding your body with stress hormones.
Right. The resulting flood of cortisol and adrenaline prolongs the dizzy spell. Deep breathing and nervous system regulation are physiological tools to manually shorten the duration of an attack.
Because that hormonal regulation requires stability and perimenopause is inherently unstable, the single most effective tool you have is data collection. Keep a symptom log. Track where you are in your menstrual cycle, what you ate, how many multiples of 90 minutes you slept, and your stress levels.
It is so important to track it.
Yeah, perimenopause is a moving target. The trigger might be an avocado on a day you only slept 6 hours, or maybe the fluorescent lights in a store right as your estrogen takes a nosedive. Finding your unique personal triggers gives you concrete medical data to bring to a physical therapist or doctor.
It really moves the conversation from a vague complaint to actionable diagnostic information.
Exactly. So, to summarize what we have unpacked today, if you are feeling like the floor is dropping out from under you, it is biologically real. It is the estrogen receptors in your inner ear altering your fluid dynamics. It is the shifting flexibility of your blood vessels. And it is the wildly fluctuating chemistry in your brain lowering your sensory threshold and triggering vestibular migraines.
It is a profound systemic shift. As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a broader thought drawn from the evolutionary perspective discussed in our sources.
Okay, let's hear it.
When dealing with these intense physical symptoms, it is really easy to view perimenopause as a biological failure. But why do human females live decades past their reproductive years?
Right. From an evolutionary standpoint, why does the body go through this at all?
In primate groups, survival relies heavily on older, post-fertile females. They are the keepers of wisdom. They remember where the water is during a drought, they navigate complex social conflicts, and they guide the troop.
Oh, I love that. The keepers of wisdom.
Yeah. Think of the hormonal chaos not as a breakdown, but as a reverse puberty. Your body is actively reprogramming its immune, neurological, and vestibular systems for a completely new phase of life. You are shedding the heavy biological demands of childbearing and upgrading to a new baseline of leadership. The dizziness and the turbulence are simply the temporary physiological cost of upgrading the operating system.
The temporary cost of the upgrade. That is such a powerful reframe. So the next time your internal GPS starts scrambling, remember that your body is undergoing a massive, complex transition. Sit down if you need to, give yourself some grace, track your symptoms, and advocate for yourself at the doctor's office. You really don't have to just live with the spinning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.